Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Justin's heart raced as he stared at the luminous screen, his thumb hovering over the text. A countdown timer in the corner of the device ticked. 6 hours until takeoff. A smile spread across his face, mirroring the exuberant tone of the message he was about to send. 3 days of freedom, pizza and peace, just the way I like 'em. Love you too, Mom. He hit send and sauntered through the house, his footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. The space felt cavernous without the usual chatter of his siblings. Complete privacy. His thumb hovered over the phone screen for a moment before he typed back a casual reply. Thanks, Mom. Have fun at Aunt Carol's. Don't worry about me. The silence of the house pressed in around him as he pocketed his phone. At 32, Justin had moved back home temporarily after his divorce, a situation that had started as a 2-month stopgap and somehow stretched into 8. The arrangement worked. He helped with bills while saving for a new place, and his mother got some company after his father's passing 3 years ago. But privacy? That was a luxury neither of them had much of anymore. Until now. Justin wandered through the house, the wooden floors creaking beneath his feet. He wore his typical weekend outfit, faded blue jeans and a plain gray t-shirt that had seen better days. His brown hair was cut short, practical, the same style he'd worn since college. Everything about him screamed ordinary. The hallway seemed longer than usual as he approached his mother's bedroom. The door stood slightly ajar, innocent enough. He'd gone in there plenty of times to grab something for her or help move furniture. This was different, though. His palms were already sweating. This is ridiculous, he muttered to himself. I'm a grown adult. But the thought did nothing to slow his racing heart as he pushed the door open. His mother's room was neat, as always. The bed made with military precision, the curtains drawn halfway to let in the afternoon light. The dresser stood against the far wall, its wooden surface cluttered with perfume bottles and framed photographs. Justin's eyes fixed on the second drawer from the top. He knew what was in there. He'd seen her put away laundry countless times, had accidentally glimpsed inside when looking for a spare set of keys once. His feet moved of their own accord until he stood directly in front of the dresser. Just once, he whispered to the empty room. Just to see. The drawer slid open smoothly, revealing neatly folded stacks of clothing. His fingers trembled slightly as they brushed against the fabric. The black leggings were right on top, as if waiting for him. They looked sleek, shiny, nothing like the baggy jeans he'd worn his entire life. Justin lifted them out, surprised by how light they felt. The material stretched between his hands, smooth and elastic. Before he could talk himself out of it, he was unbuttoning his jeans, letting them fall to the floor, and stepping into the leggings. The sensation was immediate and electric. The fabric hugged his legs, conforming to every contour in a way that made him feel strangely seen. He pulled them up to his waist, adjusting the waistband with shaking hands. They fit, not perfectly, but well enough, better than he'd expected. He turned toward the full-length mirror on the closet door, breath catching in his throat. The person staring back at him wasn't entirely Justin anymore. From the waist down, the black leggings transformed his legs, making them look longer, more shapely.
Wow,
he breathed, turning to see himself from different angles. The contrast between the leggings and his baggy gray t-shirt was jarring. Without thinking, he turned back to the drawer, fingers seeking something else, something to complete the picture that was forming in his mind. His hand closed around soft cashmere. a pink sweater his mother had received last Christmas. He'd complimented her on it once, the way it caught the light, how soft it looked. Now, he pulled his t-shirt over his head and carefully, reverently, slipped the sweater on. It was tight across his shoulders but otherwise fit well enough. The color brightened his complexion in a way he'd never noticed before. Standing there in leggings and a pink sweater, Justin felt something unlock inside him. A door creaking open after years of being sealed shut. His eyes fell on his mother's makeup bag, sitting on the bathroom counter. The next step in a journey he hadn't planned, but suddenly couldn't stop. The bathroom light was harsh and unforgiving as Justin stared at his reflection. The face looking back at him was the same one he'd seen every morning of his adult life. But today, it seemed like a canvas waiting for transformation. His mother's makeup bag sat open beside the sink, its contents arranged neatly, each product a mystery.
Okay,
he muttered, reaching for what he recognized as foundation. How hard can this be? The answer, as it turned out, was very hard. His first attempt left him looking like he'd applied his makeup in the dark. Too much foundation, uneven eyeliner, and lipstick that somehow ended up on his teeth. He washed it all off, face burning with embarrassment despite being alone. His second attempt was more careful. He watched his technique in the mirror, applying foundation in small dabs, blending with his fingertips, a touch of blush on the apples of his cheeks. The eyeshadow was trickier, but he managed a subtle wash of pink that complemented the sweater. The lipstick was last, a rose color that his mother wore to special occasions. He traced the outline of his lips with trembling hands, then filled them in. The transformation staring back at him was subtle, but undeniable.
That's me,
he whispered, the words sounding strange in the quiet bathroom. He didn't look like a woman, not really, but he didn't quite look like Justin anymore either. There was a softness to his features now, a different kind of presence. He reached up to touch his short brown hair, suddenly wishing it were longer, wondering how that would complete the picture. Time slipped away as he stood there, examining himself from different angles, adjusting the sweater, smoothing the leggings. There was a rightness to this that he couldn't explain, a feeling of alignment he'd never experienced before. His phone buzzed in the pocket of his discarded jeans, startling him back to reality. The spell broken, Justin suddenly felt ridiculous, standing in his mother's clothes, wearing her makeup. He should change, wash his face, pretend this never happened. But he didn't. Instead, he retrieved his phone, checking the message. Just a notification from a news app, then walked back to his mother's room in search of something else, something to complete what he'd started. In her closet, he found a pair of black ballet flats that looked like they might fit. They were snug, but wearable. The wig drawer was next. His mother had started wearing wigs occasionally after chemo 3 years ago, though her brown hair had grown back beautifully since then. The wig he chose was similar to her natural color, a rich brown with subtle highlights. It fell just past the shoulders, the style simple and straight. His hands were steadier now as he positioned it on his head, adjusting until it sat naturally. The person who stared back from the mirror was a stranger. A woman with uncertain eyes, wearing a pink sweater and black leggings, brown hair framing a face that somehow looked right for the first time. "Hello?" he whispered, and watched the woman's lips move with his words. His phone buzzed again, this time with a call. The name of his college buddy flashed on the screen. Justin answered without thinking. "Hey, Rob." "Dude, you free tonight? Watching the game at O'Malley's with the guys. Been forever since you came out." Justin looked at his reflection, at the pink lipstick and the way the sweater hugged his chest. "I can't tonight. I'm busy." "Come on, man. You never leave that house anymore. What could you possibly be doing that's more important than beer and basketball?" Finding myself, Justin thought. But what he said was,
"Just not feeling it tonight. Maybe next time."
The call ended with the usual half-hearted promises to catch up soon. Justin set the phone down on the dresser, his decision already made. Tonight belonged to this new person in the mirror. She needed time to exist, to breathe, to understand what this all meant. The weekend stretched before her, full of possibility. Friday night passed in a blur of discovery. Justin, who had started thinking of herself as Zoe in these moments, practiced walking in the ballet flats, struggled with applying mascara without poking herself in the eye, and spent hours just existing in this new form. She ordered pizza and felt a strange thrill when the delivery guy called her Miss through the crack in the door. She only opened it wide enough to pass money and receive the box. But that brief moment of validation stayed with her long after the pizza was gone. By Saturday morning, Zoe had developed a routine. She carefully applied the makeup she'd been practicing with, positioned the brown wig just right, and selected another outfit from her mother's closet. A soft blue dress that hugged her waist and flared gently at the hips. The dress was meant for someone shorter, hitting Zoe mid-thigh rather than at the knee, as it would on her mother, but the effect was still pleasing. Standing in the living room, Zoe twirled slowly, feeling the dress swish around her legs. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly acknowledge what was happening. This wasn't just curiosity or a one-time experiment. This felt like uncovering something that had always been there, buried beneath layers of expectations and assumptions. "Zoe," she said aloud, testing the name. It felt right in her mouth, like a piece of herself she'd been missing. Shame tried to creep in at the edges of her mind. What would her ex-wife say if she could see her now? Her colleagues at the accounting firm? Her mother? The thought of her mother coming home early, catching her in these clothes, with this makeup on, sent a spike of panic through her chest. But another part of her, a stronger part, pushed back against the fear. This was real. This was true. And keeping it hidden was becoming increasingly painful. Zoe spent Saturday organizing her thoughts, making lists, researching online between periods of just being herself. She learned about gender dysphoria, about transgender experiences, about the spectrum of gender identity. Some of what she read resonated so deeply it brought tears to her eyes. Other parts didn't quite fit her experience. But the overall picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't going away. By Sunday afternoon, Zoe had made a decision. When her mother returned, they would need to talk. The thought terrified her, but the alternative, going back to being only Justin, pretending this revelation had never happened, was unbearable. She was sitting at the kitchen table in black leggings and a cream-colored blouse, the brown wig styled in a simple ponytail, when she heard the key in the front door. Her heart hammered in her chest, fight-or-flight instinct screaming at her to run, to hide, to wash off the makeup and change clothes. Instead, she took a deep breath and stood up. Her mother stepped into the kitchen, overnight bag still in hand, mouth opening to deliver a greeting that never came. She froze, eyes widening as she took in the sight before her. "Justin?" The question was barely a whisper. "Mom!" Zoe replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I need to tell you something important. My name is Zoe." The overnight bag hit the floor with a soft thud. I don't understand, her mother said, still standing in the doorway as if afraid to come closer.
Is this a joke?
Zoe shook her head, the brown hair of the wig swaying gently with the movement. No, Mom, this is me. The real me. I've been hiding it for so long, but I can't anymore. She gestured to the chair across from her. Please, can we talk about this? Her mother moved woodenly to the table, sinking into the chair without taking her eyes off her child. Your father's sweater, she said faintly, reaching out to touch the sleeve of the cream blouse. I'm sorry about borrowing your clothes without asking. I'll replace anything That's not what I meant, her mother interrupted, tears gathering in her eyes. That's not your father's sweater. It's mine. You look so much like your father's sister. My sister-in-law, wearing it. She passed before you were born, but... She trailed off, shaking her head in wonder. Aunt Teresa? The one in the photos? Zoe had seen pictures of her father's sister, had always thought she looked kind. Her mother nodded, a strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She was transgender too. Transitioned in her 30s, just like... She gestured at Zoe, fresh tears spilling over. I didn't know, Zoe whispered, stunned by this revelation. Dad never mentioned... Your father loved his sister dearly, but he struggled with the change at first. By the time you were born, they had reconciled, but then she got sick. Her mother reached across the table, taking Zoe's hand in hers. She would have loved to know you, the real you. The kitchen filled with a silence that wasn't uncomfortable, but heavy with meaning. Finally, her mother spoke again. So, Zoe, she said, the name sounding natural on her lips. Tell me about yourself. The conversation lasted hours. There were tears and questions, moments of confusion and moments of clarity. Zoe explained as best she could about the feelings she'd always had, but never understood, about the liberation of the past weekend, about her fears for the future. Her mother listened, asked thoughtful questions, and shared stories about Aunt Teresa that had never been told before. By the time the kitchen grew dark around them, a new understanding had formed between them. This won't be easy, her mother said, squeezing Zoe's hand. But you're not alone. We'll figure it out together. For the first time since discovering this truth about herself, Zoe felt the knot of anxiety in her chest begin to loosen. The road ahead would be challenging, but having her mother's support made it seem possible. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change. Zoe began therapy with a specialist in gender identity, started growing out her natural brown hair while still using the wig, and slowly began building a wardrobe of her own rather than borrowing her mother's clothes. She continued working at the accounting firm, still presenting as Justin, but the strain of maintaining two separate identities was taking its toll. Each morning, as she buttoned up shirts that felt increasingly foreign and styled her growing hair to look more masculine for work, she felt like she was putting on a costume, playing a role that no longer fit. 3 months after that first weekend of discovery, Zoe sat in her therapist's office, dressed fully as herself in a navy blue dress and low heels, her growing brown hair supplemented by the wig that now felt like a part of her. I can't keep living 2 lives, she admitted, twisting her hands in her lap. Every day at work feels like betraying myself, but I'm terrified of what happens if I come out there. Dr. Reynolds nodded, her expression compassionate. That's a common feeling among my patients.
There's never a perfect time to transition in the workplace, Zoe, but I've found that the anticipation is often worse than the reality.
I could lose my job, Zoe countered, voicing her deepest fear. I'm good at what I do, but that might not matter once they see me as different.
That's a legitimate concern, Dr. Reynolds acknowledged. But remember, there are legal protections in place. And from what you've told me about your company's diversity policies, they at least have the framework for supporting employees through transition. Zoe nodded, having researched the company handbook extensively. On paper, the firm was progressive. In reality, that remained to be seen. I think I'm ready, she said finally, the words sending both terror and relief coursing through her. I need to be whole. The following Monday, Zoe sat in her car in the office parking lot, heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She wore a conservative black pencil skirt and a burgundy blouse, her brown hair styled simply, makeup understated but feminine. She had emailed her direct supervisor the night before, requesting a private meeting first thing this morning. The walk from her car to the building felt like the longest journey of her life. She kept her eyes forward, ignoring the double takes from colleagues who didn't immediately recognize her. The receptionist's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise as Zoe signed in. Good morning, Marcia, Zoe said, her voice soft but steady. Good morning, Marcia replied, clearly unsure who she was addressing. Zoe's supervisor, David, was waiting in his office, expression carefully neutral as she entered. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Thank you for meeting with me, Zoe began, clasping her hands to keep them from shaking. As I mentioned in my email, I'm going through some significant personal changes.
David nodded.
I gathered as much, he said, his tone professional if a bit strained. I appreciate your courage in being forthright about this, Justin. Or should I call you something else now? Zoe, she replied, relief washing over her at his measured response. My name is Zoe. The meeting went better than she had dared hope. David had clearly done some research overnight, asking thoughtful questions about her preferred name and pronouns, discussing practical matters like email addresses and nameplates, and assuring her that he would support her through this transition. There may be some who don't understand at first, he warned her. But from a company standpoint, you have our full support. Your work has always been exceptional, and that's what matters most to me. By lunchtime, the office was buzzing with the news. Zoe could feel the stares as she worked at her desk, could hear the whispers when she walked to the break room. Some colleagues avoided her entirely. Others, like her friend in accounting, Rachel, made a point of stopping by her desk. The burgundy is totally your color, Rachel said by way of greeting, perching on the edge of Zoe's desk. Also, you have way better makeup skills than me, which is deeply unfair. Zoe laughed, tension draining from her shoulders. Trust me, you should have seen my first attempts. I looked like a raccoon that had been in a fight. We should grab lunch this week, Rachel continued, as if nothing had changed between them. You can give me some makeup tips, and I can fill you in on all the office gossip you've been missing while hiding in your cubicle. By the end of that first day, Zoe was exhausted but exhilarated. The reactions had been mixed: confusion, support, uncomfortable silence, and genuine curiosity. But she had survived. More than survived. She had taken the first step toward living authentically in all aspects of her life. As the weeks passed, the novelty of Zoe's transition faded in the day-to-day rhythm of the office. There were still occasional awkward moments. A client who knew her as Justin being confused a colleague who struggled with pronouns, but increasingly, Zoe was accepted simply as herself. At home, the relationship with her mother deepened as they navigated this new chapter together. They shopped for clothes, discussed hormone therapy options, and shared quiet evenings talking about everything from Zoe's childhood to her hopes for the future. "I never really knew you before," her mother admitted one night as they sat on the porch swing. "I mean, I knew Justin, and I loved him dearly, but there was always something held back, something distant. Now, watching you as Zoe, it's like seeing you in full color for the first time." Zoe leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, the brown hair of her wig, soon to be unnecessary as her natural hair continued to grow, catching the light of the setting sun. "I didn't know myself either," she replied softly. "Not really. But I'm learning." 6 months after that first weekend of discovery, Zoe began hormone therapy. The changes were subtle at first, skin softening, emotions more present, slight shifts in how fat distributed on her body. But as the months passed, the person looking back at her in the mirror aligned more and more with the person she knew herself to be. Her growing natural brown hair eventually reached a length where she no longer needed the wig, though she kept it as a reminder of where her journey had begun. Her wardrobe evolved from borrowed items to clothes that truly expressed her style. Professional at work, casual but feminine at home. A year and a half into her transition, Zoe sat in a coffee shop waiting for someone she hadn't seen since before she became herself. Her ex-wife had reached out, asking to meet. The divorce had been amicable enough. They had grown apart long before papers were filed, but Zoe hadn't spoken to her since moving out, and certainly not since becoming Zoe. The door chimed, and Heather walked in, scanning the room until her eyes landed on Zoe. There was a moment of hesitation, a flash of surprise despite knowing who she was meeting, and then Heather approached the table. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat opposite Zoe. "You look happy." Zoe smiled, touched by the observation. "I am. Happier than I think I've ever been." Heather nodded, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I can see that. It's strange, but looking at you now, so many things about our marriage make sense. You were always searching for something, always slightly out of reach, even to yourself." "I'm sorry," Zoe said, meaning it deeply. "I didn't understand what was missing then. If I had, maybe I could have been more honest with both of us." "No need to apologize. We weren't right for each other, but that doesn't mean those years didn't matter." Heather reached across the table, briefly squeezing Zoe's hand. "I'm glad you found yourself." They talked for over an hour, catching up on each other's lives, finding a new kind of friendship possible now that old wounds had healed. As they parted ways outside the coffee shop, Heather hugged her, a gesture of acceptance that meant more than words could express. "Take care of yourself, Zoe," she said, stepping back with a genuine smile. "You deserve to be happy." Walking home through the autumn afternoon, Zoe reflected on how far she had come. The fear and shame that had once threatened to overwhelm her had been replaced by a quiet confidence, a certainty in who she was. There were still challenges, dating as a transgender woman, dealing with occasional misunderstandings or prejudice, navigating the medical aspects of transition, but she faced them as her authentic self. The house came into view, the porch light already on against the gathering dusk. Her mother would be inside, probably preparing dinner, creating the safe haven that had allowed Zoe to become herself. Soon, Zoe would be ready to find a place of her own again, to continue building her independent life. But for now, this home remained the foundation of her transformation. Zoe paused at the end of the walkway, looking at the warm light spilling from the windows. 2 years ago, she had been living a half-life, disconnected from her true self, going through motions that never quite fit. Now, she walked through the world as Zoe, in her burgundy blouse at work, in her favorite sundress on weekends, with her natural brown hair framing a face that finally felt like her own. What had started as curiosity, that first pair of black leggings, that first tentative application of lipstick, had revealed the person she was always meant to be. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But the woman standing there in the gathering twilight, keys in hand and future bright before her, was finally, completely herself. Zoe smiled and walked up the path toward home, each step carrying her further into the life she was meant to live all along.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!